Gracie Jiu-Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 87 of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. Today is all about saying goodbye to 2017. So, gonna highlight a few clips from this past year's episodes, and then just kind of recap all the episodes. So for me, end of the year is a time of reflection and really looking at the year and kind of what you've done, what you've accomplished, how it's gone, what you'd like to maybe have done better, and to start looking at the next year and planning on how you want that year to be and what your purpose is going to be for that year and how are you going to live on purpose in the next year. So let's go ahead and start with our clips for this year. The first one is from Eve Gracie. And Eve, as you know, is a very accomplished person, entertainer, and has just had success in so many realms. Had a great interview with her. So this clip talks about the power of believing in yourself.
That was really the lesson that taught me. And I still go by that. And it's hard sometimes because, like I said, I think my natural instinct is to always feel like the rug is going to be pulled out from underneath me, or like things are too good to be true, or, I'm always kind of doubting the situation. And I've just had to really learn how to let go of that. And it's taken time, but it's ultimately part of that is by proving to myself that this is what really works. And I think I've done that for a few different things. Is that if I allow myself to believe in myself, then it's really amazing what can happen. But it's scary.
It is.
It's scary to do that.
But it's a beautiful and powerful thing, and I think it makes your impact that much stronger and better, because it's one thing to have someone who people can look up to and look what all this person's done and accomplished with their life. But it's another to know that person has struggled and, with self-doubt and had to overcome and still struggles at times and still was able to push through it and find a way to really, make great things happen. That's a great impact. It's a great example.
Yeah, it is. And like I said, it's something I constantly battle with for different areas of my life. Like there might be one area that I'm like, oh, this is going great. And then another I say, oh, this is never going to, or it's not going to pan out the way I want it, or I just might as well give up on this, or, and it's just it's really important, I think, to let go of that doubt. I think it's a sign of intelligence. My belief is that, people who are obviously a little bit more cautious or a little bit like, is everything is this going to happen the way I want it to? I think it is a sign of, intelligence in some people to question things, but ultimately, you can't overthink anything. Yeah. You can't overthink everything or you won't accomplish anything.
Well, it also can be a form of, protection, self-protection. You don't want to be caught off guard, and you want to prepare
100%.
Yourself for the worst, should something happen.
You don't want to let yourself down either. You don't really want to go for something and then fail.
That's right.
But, failure, it's crazy the things that have come out of failures.
Yeah, so true. the power, your perspective is everything, and the power of belief, like you said in that motto or that quote, the power of belief is everything. And I'm a big believer in positive self messages and talks and quotes, stuff like that. So I constantly read things, I constantly listen to things, and it's people say, well, that motivation stuff doesn't last. And you say, well, neither does brushing your teeth. That's why you have to do it
right.
daily and condition yourself,
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of the same with this, the power of belief. You have to build it on a daily basis.
You totally do. And like the one person that's really helped me with that and really shown me what can be done is Henner. There's one thing I'll say about Henner is he believes in his in his mission. He believes in what he does. He believes in his ideas. And he'll have an idea, and he will be relentless with that idea, as you can see with Gracie University, with, all the programs he's created. Once he has an idea and he believes in it, he is absolutely relentless until that idea is accomplished. And I've seen him have failures. I've seen him get really, really excited about something and go, and it not pan out the way he wanted. But what I love about it is that never turned into him, second guessing his next idea ever. Right. He just said, all right, he learned some value. Okay, this is why that, I have to tweak this, or that didn't work because of this. And he just goes. And so, he's somebody who's just model. And he's also, it's nice also to have somebody who believes in you as well. Yeah, because absolutely. Like, as I said, it's hard to have that 100% belief. And you're like, wow, is this a good idea? I don't know. Like, will this work? And, to have somebody else say, oh my gosh, this is, this is great. You can do that. And like to someone bounce ideas off of, and someone to really ultimately just believe that you can do what you say, and he believes in you as much as you do, or maybe even more.
Yeah, that's a great combination, to have some people who kind of say, okay, let's not just go off unbridled. Let's kind of weigh everything. Let's step back and think about it. And then you got someone else who's like, let's go full steam, and kind of bounce things back and forth on each other. It's great, a great combination to do that. Keeps it in check, but also, helps with that belief and that motivation.
Yeah, we're like the number one, checking each other's ideas a little bit, like, well, what about this? We're always devil's advocate, but at the end of the day, we it's all support and awesome. Belief in our abilities.
Okay, next clip is from the episode with Steve Kardian. And in this clip, Steve talks about how he got into the work he currently does, and then a life-changing experience he had that opened his eyes to the fact that he is meant to serve the public. Where you analyze the nation's most high-profile criminal cases, things like that. That's pretty cool. How did you get selected to do that, and what's that experience been like for you?
It's been amazing. You meet some amazing people, and my favorite part of it is it causes me to do research that I might not otherwise be doing on all the high-profile cases in the United States. Back in 2003, one of my Defend University Girls on Guard instructors, who happened to be a high school teacher and a child safety expert, was contacted by Inside Edition to do a segment on, it was a case involving, I think she was a 10 or 11-year-old girl, Carly Bruscia. And if you saw the image of her being led behind a gas station, I think it was in Sarasota, Florida, to her ultimate demise, they asked, well, what would you do? So I was in uniform. He said, listen, I'm kind of shaky with the technique. Do you think you could come and walk me through it? So my job allowed me to take the police car down to New York City to Inside Edition, and we recreated the Carly Bruscia story. And after we had done the segment, all of a sudden the senior producer for the investigative unit was like, can I talk to you for a minute? And 2 hours later, that was the start of my media career. And from there, what happens is if you do a good job, they like you. People steal your name. So if they leave and go to another network, they bring your name with you. So that led to HLN, to CNN, to the Mike and Juliet show, to Fox and Friends, which I love so dearly. They're amazing. And mostly Inside Edition and Fox News. They're my favorite. HLN I love because it's more news now rather than the political aspect. But it's great. I get to give interpretations of law enforcement and solutions to problems that plague the United States in terms of violence and people being taken advantage of.
Yeah, it's really great. I've caught you on a few of those shows, and you do such a great and professional job. and provide a valuable service. So very cool opportunity.
Thank you.
Let's change gears just a little, Steve, and tell us something that most people would be surprised to know about you.
Well, there's a lot of things. One, that I'm a practical joker.
Okay.
Number two, and actually interesting, it's something I don't talk about, something I haven't talked about in a long time, but it will be in the book. And that, many years later, my partner, Brad Parker, told me that it was one of those defining moments that said, you're destined to serve the public. I had been on a beach in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, and I was with my girlfriend, now wife at the time. And, we were going to go to a specific area. And this is a time when I think that my intuition kicked in. For some reason, I felt like I had to go back. So we turn back, and I start walking, back to the beach where we were. And I see a lady jump out of her chair, and a magazine goes flying. She's screaming. There's a pile of sand. I go running up, and I see 2 feet sticking out of the sand. So she goes, a boy, he's buried. And what he had done was, the night before, it had rained, and he created a huge mound of sand, and he dug a tunnel into it. And the tunnel ended up collapsing on him. And so it took me a bit to dig him out, and I got him, and I lifted him up, and I screamed, and, I handed him to his aunt. She immediately handed him back to me. He was purple. His eyes were rolled back in his head, and he was lifeless. So I took him, and at this point in time, there were over 20 adults. Now, I'm 17. I'm a 17-year-old punk-ass jock. And, my girlfriend there with me, we're just enjoying the beach, and there's 20 adults, and I have this lifeless body in my hands, and I'm begging, does anybody know CPR? Does anybody know CPR? Does anybody know CPR? And nobody would even answer me. They were in a state of shock. Wow. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. In my mind, I'm saying, seriously, you all live here. And this goes through your mind in a second. You vacation here. Nobody knows CPR. So that summer before, there was a pamphlet that was sent home. And this is actually how I actually learned about the blueprint. I had read about doing mouth-to-mouth rescue breathing and CPR. And that enabled me to be able to save that kid's life. So I began rescue breathing, and it seemed like forever. And I remember looking, and between breaths, because, the sand was uneven, I was kind of down in a ditch. I remember looking and seeing my leg shaking. And, I was able to get him breathing again. And when they took him to the hospital, the doctors were like, this kid was near death. So the state trooper and the ambulance corps captain came back to where we were, and they're like, I just want to shake your hand. And all of a sudden, all these articles came out. The Associated Press picked it up. Wow. My hometown newspaper, they came and interviewed me. The Lions Club honored me. The chief of police, came to my house to visit me. And then I kind of forgot about it. And, then later in years, discussing it with my partners, like, that was when you were destined to serve the public in some capacity. I mean, why? And then later I wondered why, and the newspaper followed up with a printing. Why was that task delegated to a 17-year-old kid when there were 20 adults that not only live and vacation in that area, and not one of them would have been able to save that child's life? So there was something wrong there. And that's some of the motivation for me to empower people with knowledge and information that will be able to have them react under those times of stress.
What an amazing story. Talk about a defining moment in your life, and wow, really setting a course in action. Okay, next clip is from our episode on yoga and jiu-jitsu. And this is a clip from Phil Migliarese's segment. And we did have a number of people contribute to that segment, which is a really great and popular episode, I might add. So here's Phil talking about breathing and its importance in yoga. One statement on your website, Yoga for Fighters, that really stands out that I love is, Yoga for Fighters can help you center yourself and control your first opponent, your own ego. So that's really great.
100%. Because it gives you time to sit with yourself, to breathe, and to deal with yourself. I taught a course this weekend, like a 4-hour boot camp, and part of what I try to instill, I always call it like the yoga bubble. Sounds silly, but it's is this imaginary bubble right around your mat. And only, you're only into what you're doing, your mat, your postures. Don't worry about what else is going on in that classroom, who can do what. That's something you should never, ever focus on. It's one way to pull back your improvement. And consciousness, because you're paying attention on the outside, not the inside. So,
that's great, man.
And that leads a lot to ego. And your ego wants you to do bigger, better things instead of just doing what you can and doing it often.
And your ego wants you to compare yourself to those around you. So I love that bubble because it helps you focus on what's important right there, right in the moment, and you, nothing else. So in a society that has so many distractions and are easily distracted, it's such a key principle to keep in mind and incorporate.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about the breath work aspect of your program and your practice. Just how important is that part? And talk a little bit about that.
The breathing system I borrowed from the Ashtanga yoga program. It's a type of breathing. Sanskrit word is called Ujjayi breathing, means sound, something you can hear, sound, victorious breath. So it's a total nasal breath, and this is the type of breathing that we do while we're in motion, while we transition from pose to pose. So it's called a vinyasa. So you go linking one pose to the next, or linking breathing together with posture. And it's a 100% nasal breath. The inhale is just a deep inhale, very deep into the chest, and then secondly in the belly. And then the exhale sounds like Darth Vader. It's very hard. It's very hard to show on a tape, on a video. You can get a sense of it, but I've, like I said, I just did a boot camp this weekend, a 4-hour thing. I was able to dig into the breathing method a lot better. The thing that I can tell you when you're doing the practice, be as conscious as possible in the way you're breathing. So hopefully you're in a class with a qualified instructor, you're watching a video with a qualified instructor, and they should have that emphasis on breathing. Part of what yoga is the connection between breathing and movement, breathing and posture. So you could do a moving meditation, just walking down the street, breathing, and putting your walking together with breathing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a flowing yoga pose or a yoga sequence.
Absolutely. In fact, breathing during movement is vitally important.
100%. And it's the parallel to fighting in jiu-jitsu. And I also made a distinction. Yoga is not jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is not yoga. And what I mean by that is that the breathing method in jiu-jitsu is plenty different than the breathing method of movement-based, vinyasa-based yoga. So those are other things we reviewed, methods of breathing on the mat. So they're a little bit different, but still the consciousness parallel is what you want to focus on. So you should be conscious of your breathing while you're rolling, too.
Absolutely. Very key. Okay, next is a clip from an episode about injuries. And again, I had several great people contributing to that episode as well. And this clip is from Roy Dean's segment.
I've had a couple of knee injuries that, while they didn't require surgery, they were definitely a blow, both, physically taking me off the mat, and then emotionally, there's an aftermath when dealing with the injury that's also very tough to stomach. I was doing a demonstration once. It was a blue belt demonstration. I hadn't warmed up enough. One of my students was testing for his blue belt. I hadn't warmed up enough. He was very warm, very athletic. I tried a knee cut calf. He held onto my foot with his knees, and I just heard this pop.
Oh, man.
And, another time I was sparring with somebody, and they did kind of a crazy deep half sweep, and my knee bent the wrong way, rotated outwards, and popped twice. And those were both pretty difficult injuries, but, originally when I was a younger martial artist, I felt like these injuries would last forever. But after you've gone through a number of injuries, you realize, okay, that's just a setback. It's not permanent. And you just allow yourself to rest. That 2-week period after the initial injury is really critical, that you don't re-injure it and you don't make it worse. So for people that think they're, really tough and going to train through it, if you get a significant injury in your knee, that is a window that you need to avoid. Take some time off. And then, essentially rehabilitation, strengthening. Not always testing the range of motion, but getting on that bicycle, strengthening the muscles around it, and just taking it easy. And when you come back to the mat, don't be afraid to give up a position if it puts that injury in any kind of danger or strain.
Good advice for sure. What do you say to people that, I'm sure you've heard this before, they're out for just a short time, but they're itching to get back on, so they say, well, I'm just going to go there. I'm not going to roll. And then when they get there and they're watching, I'm just going to go drill. Or then I'm just going to go light. And next thing you know it, they're rolling again and they're re-injuring it or aggravating it or whatnot.
Yeah, I think they're on the right track up to a point.
Okay.
So going and observing class and watching, in Japanese they call it mitori keiko, which is, watching is learning.
Nice.
So being able to watch class, sit on the sidelines, there are some significant advantages that people don't. It's kind of like it's a little bit of a secret. You watch class, you get that third-person perspective on your teammates and your classmates, and you really get to see their game in a different light. You get to see their tendencies, and by the time you hit the mat, you have just a more informed opinion of how people do things on the mat. And sometimes you can end up in an advantage because you've been studying them. On the other hand, the discipline to go to class but not roll is tough because it's infectious. The energy is infectious. You're hanging out with your friend. Oh, let me just do that. No, stay disciplined. Go to class. Watch. That's great. But then you got to call it. Don't get on the mat. Don't just watch, observe. And then when you're ready to start training again, do it in a progressive fashion. Just do the drills, work with really safe people that you trust, preferably an upper belt if possible. And make your way back. But observing and studying other people's tendencies while you're injured, that's one of the key breakthroughs that you can have in your game. The second breakthrough that you can get through suffering an injury is that you have to adapt physically. Like, okay, for example, Gordo invented the half guard after a knee injury. And there's a way that you will adapt your movement and discover techniques that you wouldn't ordinarily do. And so when you're coming back from an injury and you're protecting it, you tend to assume different body positions that safeguard it. And I think your game can really expand, and you can increase your arsenal of techniques because you would never have gone to that position unless it was necessary. And there's nothing more critical and necessary than protecting an injury.
That's good. So avoiding risky situations on your way back and being open-minded about new positions that maybe you weren't that keen on before.
Exactly.
All right. In this final clip, Robb Wolf talks about his experience in jiu-jitsu and then how we can kind of counterbalance some of the physical toll that some of the postures we assume on a continuous or frequent basis in jiu-jitsu takes on our bodies. So great stuff here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I again, like I'm a novice with the jiu-jitsu, but I have a decent movement and coaching background in general. And this was something that, again, I got from Henry, and Henry got from Rickson, which Rickson made the point, you may not be able to beat everyone, as in submit them, but it's actually an easier process to be unbeatable yourself, which is basically, having this really, really buttoned up defensive game. And, again, going back to the roots of jiu-jitsu as a self-defense modality, maybe you didn't, quote, win the fight by a punch, a kick, a submission, but if you were not punched, kicked, submitted, knocked out, then, you also were not necessarily beat or knocked unconscious or otherwise injured. So I think it's got interesting, implications both from the self-defense side, and then also if you're more into the sport jiu-jitsu, it can be really helpful. Although the sport jiu-jitsu, because of the time constraints, like it really does force a much more active, more wrestling type game. Like you don't have that time to just, you don't have 20 minutes to develop the conversation and, test all the defenses and whatnot. You've just got to get in and really do some big movement.
That's true. That's a great point. So one more question about jiu-jitsu, and then we'll move into some health and nutrition and your books. So jiu-jitsu long-term, as great as it is, can also lead to some issues. And one of those is the tendency to have rounded shoulders for a lot of practitioners because of positions they spend tons of time in. So do you have any thoughts on how we as practitioners can counter this?
Man, that's a great question. And this is, some of the best prehab or rehab that I've seen for jiu-jitsu is actually kind of gymnastics or capoeira oriented conditioning and mobility and stuff like that, because it has so much back extension and back bend type of activity. Virtually everything that we do in jiu-jitsu, you're flexing at the trunk, you're kind of, rocking forward, kind of a crunching movement. And we do this just thousands and thousands and thousands of times in the weeks and months of training. And we do almost no counter movements of, back extension, scapular retraction. And I've been following the Gymnastics Bodies workout, which is an online workout, and it provides an assessment. And so you go through some tests, both of your strength and your mobility. And then based off that, it prescribes you a workout, and you have strength and mobility elements that deal with the upper body, the lower body, the trunk, stretching. And you need to hit competency within all these different pieces to advance to the next level. And it's really modularized and granular. So you have this stuff broken up quite nicely, but you also have years and years of potential progress on this. And but if there was just something really simple that folks could do is a ton of Supermans, like when you lay on your belly and the hands are either straight over your head or out to the side in a T, and you arch up at the back. The lotus kind of position in yoga, where you put your hands in your crotch and then you're laying on top of that, and then you extend the legs, kind of like a reverse hyper movement.
Okay.
Anything like that, maybe even kettlebell swings or banded good mornings. Really high reps. It wouldn't necessarily need to be super heavy, but just think about, like an average jiu-jitsu class, you might get, let's say 100, just as a number to pick, but you might have 100 crunching type movements per class. We should try to get as many extension type movements, with some sort of back extension movement, whether it's the Supermans, the lotus movement, banded back extensions or good mornings. We should try to get an equal or even greater number of those other movements to balance all this stuff out. And you see it with boxers, jiu-jitsu players, wrestlers. That defensive position of kind of rounded back and hunched forward is really good in the athletic realm, and it is absolutely horrible the rest of your life. So thinking about some prehab and rehab to undo that is really smart.
All right. Hope you enjoyed those clips. Really had some great guests on this year. I'm just going to go through each episode just quickly and talk about what it was. And I'm going to count it down from the most recent one back into the start of the year, which I think will make it fun. So the most recent episode was episode 86, was with Marcus Koval, MMA fighter, instructor, and founder of Liam's Life, an organization very dear to his heart after losing his son to a drunk driver at 1.5 years old. So if you haven't heard that episode, definitely check it out and help Marcus with that cause. Episode 85 was with Victoria Gracie, and Victoria has done a lot of things in her life, and she spoke about her most recent endeavor, which is a children's book about jiu-jitsu and anti-bullying. Episode 84 was about yoga and jiu-jitsu, and I had 5 black belts in jiu-jitsu who also are very into yoga, including Phil Migliarese of Yoga for Fighters, Nick Grigoriades from the Jiu-Jitsu Brotherhood and Yoga for Grapplers, Dustin Brown from Warrior One Yoga, Joey Deal, and Sebastian Broche, who does yoga for BJJ. Great episode. The Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment was on Savoring the Moment. In episode 83, it was Greg Nelson, Pedro Sauer's first black belt and world-renowned MMA coach. Great episode there. He talked about all kinds of different things in his life, and the Make a Difference segment was about mental fortitude. Episode 82 was with Jennifer Gray, who recently became Jennifer Gay, as she married Ty Gay a few months ago, and she is the founder of Shijitsu. She talks about the compelling life story she's had and all that she's been through, and how she's spreading the message now to help those around her. The guest host for the Make a Difference segment on that episode was Houston Cottrell of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Madison. Episode 81 was with Nick Grigoriades, Roger Gracie's first black belt and founder of the Jiu-Jitsu Brotherhood. In the Make a Difference segment was an excerpt from Joshua Page, owner of Hickory Academy of Martial Arts, his blog, which discusses holding on to your joy. Episode 80 was with Master Carlos Machado, and the Make a Difference segment was excerpts from Master Carlos's book, Putting the Pieces Together. Episode 79 was with John Frankel, BJJ black belt, head of John Frankel BJJ and Straight Blast Gyms representative for Asia. Episode 78 was with Tamba Holly, NFL superstar and Gracie Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. It also started with a book review, The New Superpower for Women by Steve Kardian. Episode 77 was with John Wagner, BJJ black belt and certified instructor. And the Make a Difference segment was from Chris Bailey, owner of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Scottsdale, where he discussed continuing education. Episode 76 was with Hideron Gracie, and it was a special Meet the Listeners segment. So really enjoyed that. It's where I teamed up with Hideron, and we surprised listeners who thought they would just be talking to me for a Meet the Listener segment, and they got to speak with Hideron as well. Listeners that we spoke to included Jason Henry, Eric Julio, Jason Rubin, Dan Thiel, Nelson Ruiz, Chrissy Vogel, Brian Terra, and Jesse Bennett. That was a lot of fun there. Episode 75 was all about injuries, how to prevent them, and what to do when you have them. And guests that contributed to this episode were Ty Gay, Roy Dean, Hideron Gracie, Mark Kukro, and Henry Akins. And the Make a Difference segment was an excerpt from Lynn Lane's Warrior of Success, Morning Mojo. Episode 74 was with 5th degree black belt Roy Harris. And the Make a Difference segment was about the importance of stopping, looking back, and acknowledging your accomplishments. Episode 73 was with Roberto Bayona and Alberto Raballo of Milwaukee Flow. Really fun interview with some very interesting guys. In the Make a Difference segment, I discussed the weight of stress and the importance of taking time to unplug. In episode 72, had Pedro Sauer black belt Jorge Jimenez, owner of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Balance Academy in Sharpsburg, Georgia. And the Make a Difference segment was with guest Howard Steele, owner of Delaware Bushido Academy, who discussed self-talk. Episode 71 was with Dr. Belisa Vranic. And Dr. Belisa is a breathing expert, and she certainly rekindled my passion for breathing, which I had for many years ago, and definitely rekindled that. And I immediately started on a path of study with her and becoming a much better adept at breathing for performance. Episode 70 was with Eve Torres, and Eve, as you heard in her excerpt, a very interesting person, and Henry Gracie's wife as well. And the Make a Difference segment was about the notion that you become what you practice most. Episode 69 featured Hideron Gracie on the show to recap the Jiu-Jitsu Lifestyle Summit. It also featured clips from various attendees of the event, including Ty Gay, Jennifer Gray, Chris Bailey, Marco Moreno, Rob Wilder, Mark Marins, Chris Ratte, Tessa Lynn, Evandro Nunez, Don Cook, and Victoria Gracie. Certainly one of the most popular episodes of the year. Episode 68 was from Jeet Kune Do expert and BJJ black belt Burton Richardson. I had been a longtime fan of his, so it was quite an honor to be able to have him on the show, for sure. And the Make a Difference segment was about leaving your comfort zone and challenging yourself. Episode 67 was with Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt Eddie Cohn. And Eddie's the owner and head instructor of Eddie Cohn Academy of Jiu-Jitsu in the UK. And the guest host for the Make a Difference segment on this episode was Carrie Hakama, author of Own Your Life. Episode 66 was with Robb Wolf, strength and conditioning specialist and best-selling author of The Paleo Solution and Wired to Eat, his new book. Great information from him. And the Make a Difference segment was with guest host Robert Heath, founder of the Legacy Foundation and creator of the Legacy Challenge. Episode 65 featured Professor David Adiv, and really enjoyed speaking with Professor, who's the co-founder of the original Euler Gracie David Adiv Association, which is now Gracie Amaita, and owner and head instructor of Gracie, New Jersey. So really enjoyed that. The Make a Difference segment featured Carlos Diaz, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt and owner of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Destin. And the first segment of the year was episode 64 with Steve Kardian. Steve's a world-renowned security expert, and it was a pleasure having him on the show. He had a new book released this year called The New Superpower for Women. Trust your intuition, predict dangerous situations, and defend yourself from the unthinkable. And the guest host for the Make a Difference segment on that episode was Jim Bundy, Pedro Sauer black belt and owner of Team Bundy Jiu-Jitsu. Oh, and I need to add one thing. On episode 82, the one that featured Jennifer Gray and Houston Cottrell, the Meet the Listener segment featured Mary Ocasio, who I had the chance to meet in person recently, and what a lovely person. Okay, it's been a great year. It's been a wonderful year and a challenging year. And first of all, it was super fast, incredibly fast. And they always say is the older you get, the faster they go. And that's certainly true. They need to slow down a little bit for me. I got to do a lot of great things in this year, accomplished a lot, had a lot of growth throughout the year, and a lot of adventure. I also had a lot of challenge. Lost my dad just about a month ago and had some injuries. And so it was also pretty challenging this year. But you know what? All in all, it was an incredible year. I wouldn't trade it for the world. So I really want to thank you for being on this journey with me, for listening to the show. The show's in a few months will be 4 years old, and so I've had a blast doing it. And I really thank you for being part of it. Your listening, your feedback, your suggestions really make the show what it is. And for that, I'm truly grateful. Got some really exciting guests lined up for this coming year as well, and not going to do a Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment on this one. We're just going to basically quickly talk about what I do, and I've done this on the last few year-end recap shows, talk about what I do for my New Year's and going into the new year. So first of all, I have a document I made that it has certain categories like trips I took, challenges I had this year, peak moments or experiences in the year. And what I do is usually on New Year's Eve or around it, I go through and list, where I got to go. I list what challenges I had, what I overcame, and peak moments and experiences. I also review the one from the prior year and sometimes other years as well. And it just really kind of reminds me of what all I got to do. So often we're running through our days, our weeks, our months, and our years so quickly that we don't stop and savor the time or smell the roses, so to speak. We don't stop and really think about what all we've done, what we've experienced in our life, and how we've grown. So this is an exercise I do every year, and I really get a lot out of it. So I suggest that you do it or a version of, whatever version you like of it. I just really think it helps really keep it all in perspective and really helps you appreciate your life on a whole deeper level. So again, thank you so much for being a part of the show this last year, and I wish you nothing but health and happiness and success going into this next year. We'll be starting soon with our newest episode, so have a great end of the year, and let's start the new year in a positive frame of mind with clear realistic goals, and a new commitment to move forward, to grow, and to prosper. And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. Hope you're enjoying the show. If you feel like you're benefiting from the show and want to show your support, you can support us on our Patreon page, and a link in the show notes. Please like and follow us on social media and help us spread the word by reposting our posts and telling others about the show. You can leave comments on the website at www.graciejujitsurocks.com. You can also go to iTunes and leave comments, as well as rate the show, and we would appreciate a 5-star rating, which helps us with our standing in iTunes. You can also leave comments on our YouTube channel. If you have suggestions for the show, please don't hesitate to give those. We always like feedback and suggestions. Okay, that's going to do it. So until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.